Knight. Hey everybody, it's show number 82 of The Last Angry DJ. My name is Mitchell K.C. Hill, as you can see there. I'm the old guy. I was around in radio, was in its golden age in the 70s and 80s, and I did a little spiel in the 90s. And I represent sort of like the old style when radio was king. My good friend and cohort here and the producer of the show, Mr. Alexander Knight. No relation to the Knight from Knight Rider. I'm not sure. You might be one of his, well, you know, David Hasselhoff. He was very busy in Germany. So are you any relation?
It's no shock and surprise that I am a fan of that show, and I grew up with that show. It was a pivotal moment in my upbringing. So yeah, here I am.
Good to have you here, Alex. Thank you.
For a brief period of time, I did own a 1982 Pontiac Trans Am, but we're not here to talk about cars. Good to be here, Mitch, for episode 82 of The Last Angry DJ. This is the show that interviews luminaries in the world of broadcast. We've got a special guest I would call a luminary that qualifies for that today. This is also the show that I like to say intersects old media versus new media. It's about discussing the ongoing challenges that our industries are facing, everything from terrestrial radio to podcasts and that sort of stuff, because both industries seem to be having their own unique set of challenges that they're facing right now. Of course, Mark Giuliani, another panelist that we have every single week here, who brings always a great perspective to this show, who owns a couple of radio stations. How's it going, Mark?
Good, Alex. How are you? Mitch, how are you? Listen, everyone, put your questions in. Go to thelastangry.com. That's ask.thelastangry.com. Put your questions in. We'll read them, and we'll have our guest answer them.
It's great, Mark. Thank you for being here, as always. You're the, our special guy that watches out. So when I go off the rails, you make that face that you make so well. And there it is. That's the face. And keeps us all on the straight and narrow. Speaking of straight and narrow, we started this show a little over a year and a half ago. We're quickly approaching show number 100. But way back when, in our first year, we had show number 29, and we had a very, very esteemed guest on there named Gary Berkowitz. And Gary is back as our returning champion to join us on show number 82. Gary, welcome aboard once again. We have many things that we haven't talked about that we'd love to have you on board to talk about. Gary is an expert on AC radio, adult contemporary, and I guess classic hits. Those are your two main categories, but you're also a deep thinker about broadcast as it's not. And I'm very interested because you were around in the golden age when I was on the air at WFIL, so you're still ticking, as the commercial goes. You're looking good, and I'm sure you have a lot to say about the way radio is today. Are you not?
Takes a licking and keeps on ticking. That's what I say all the time, you know?
There you go. You're the man. Absolutely. You're the man, Gary.
Absolutely. And, a lot has really, I was thinking about this, that, cause I listened back to our first show, which was, a year and a half or so ago?
Yeah, maybe? A little of that.
Yeah. And I listened back to that, and I said, wow, I was just thinking about how much has changed since then. And it's been pretty substantial. Unfortunately, maybe not in the best of ways, but pretty substantial.
Are you maybe referring to cancel culture and how that's affected us? Maybe how Jimmy Kimmel got fired and then got hired back. We had a big talk about him last week, and now he's back on board with ABC Disney. So it's a tough world out there in the media world, especially with the big owners making decisions like that.
It is a tough time, and again, I think that in the last year, and it's mainly, the fact that Mark is a station owner and is here, maybe he'll agree or disagree with some of the things that I might, say, but it almost feels like the revenue issue is looming larger over radio right now than ever before. That's all I hear from owners and managers all over the country is how tough revenues are. I honestly don't think I've had a conversation with one owner in the last year who is just telling me, "Oh my God, we are just killing it right now." So I think the revenue side, and it's not only radio; it's on television is having a real issue. Newspapers have been having an issue and continue to have an issue. I think the more mature media, radio, TV, over-the-air radio, over-the-air TV, and of course newspaper, are really starting to have revenue issues. And of course, when there's a problem with the money, there's a problem everywhere. And it's very challenging, to say the least.
I have a couple of theories about that. Is that now that money's tight, if you're a top disc jockey in a major market making big money and you have the numbers that go with it, watch out. Because a lot of guys that I know that are doing really well, have great contracts and have great numbers, are getting canned because they happen to be that low-hanging fruit that gets chopped first when they have to decide to drop finances. So that's certainly one of the big factors. And Mark, I'll let you speak for yourself. You're a independently owned radio station owner, and you have a passion for the business. But how do you keep going when it's tough to sell out there and make ends meet?
So, I think it's tough in a lot of industries. I also own an architecture and engineering company, and I think people are being very conservative with how they spend their money now. I think that radio's been fortunate because the brunt of the hit's been on TV, from what I can see. And when I look at the numbers that are put out in the industry, I see that the percentage of listeners has dropped, but if you look at the number of listeners, it's slowly growing. So, years ago where it might have been 180 million, it's slowly climbing up to 200 million, 220 million people a week are listening to radio. So that number seems to be growing, but there's just so many other opportunities for those people to consume media to consume on other platforms that it's starting to eat into the percentages. But radio is still by far the easiest way for a business to grow because it's so convenient for people just to get in the car and turn the radio on. And fortunately for radio stations, the CarPlay systems have become so complicated and become just a nightmare. So the least common denominator is go to the FM or the AM and listen to what's playing locally. Plus, no one has been able to do local like radio's been able to do local. So we can really reach the local marketplaces, the local listeners, and talk about those things that concern them. Because the big radio station owners, they're talking about national issues if they're talking about anything at all.
So it's a strategic battle too, because if you're small and live and local, hyper local, isn't it a strategy into itself? And Gary, that's what you deal with. You're a strategist as a consultant, and you have to help radio stations be more relevant on a local basis. How do you go about making all that happen?
Well, I am not one of the believers that live and local is the salvation. Okay, I don't think it is, actually. I think it's important, but I don't think it's the salvation. I think there's a much bigger picture going on in radio right now, and it's a revenue question, because we know, as broadcasters, we all know what the listeners like and what the listeners want and what they expect, and we know what we're competing with. We understand all that. But here's the real problem. The problem is if the revenues aren't there, it's going to curtail us being able to deliver to the listeners what they want, a great product. Because here's what happens. The revenues drop off, and the first hit at these radio stations is the talent. We could name dozens of talent that have been let go in the last 6 months to a year from major radio stations in major markets. So to me, there are moments where somebody called me last week and they said, "Well, how are you feeling about things?" And I said, honestly, I'm exhausted, because until we figure out the revenue side of this thing, nothing else is going to be right. And to me, it's not about and Mark, with all due respect, whether the listeners are going up or going down, or whether they're listening more, they're listening less to the radio, it's not really about that. What it's really about is the advertising world is just not believing in us like we need them to right now. And is that the case everywhere? No. But, spot radio is tough. Spot TV is very, very tough right now. Digital is the new sweetheart. Whether it's Facebook, whether it's Instagram, whether it's YouTube, whether it's, one of the many, many platforms. So I am of the belief that we have got to figure that one out first, because as the revenues continue to drop, and I am not optimistic that they're going to go in another direction that quickly. We've got to figure out how we can communicate the value and the effect that radio can have on somebody's business. Because, Mark, I'm with you. I know that radio works. I know that, radio, to use the old expression, makes the cash register ring. It does. It's very effective at doing that. But we have an issue with the people who are deciding where those dollars are going. And I just don't see a way out unless we can figure out the revenue issue. And
Gary, is this partly the metadata, collecting the information, like how people listen, where they're listening, the whole picture? Is it a good picture that radio is showing? I know that that folks in the podcasting business are also feeling the heat as far as revenues go, too, because now the advertisers are saying, hey, wait a minute, we're spending all this money with all these major podcasters, and there's a lot of them. Where's the justification? So maybe that's also tagging the radio business at the same time.
Well, I think podcasting, that's a whole separate subject, and I'm glad you brought that up, because I think podcasting reminds me a lot of FM radio. When I first got in, I remember when I first got in, AM, was the 1,000-pound gorilla, and the FM stations in most radio buildings were like in a closet, or they were like in the corner, and people used to refer to them, because I know up at a lot of the stations I worked at early on, they would refer to it as the FM. Okay, and here was sitting these 50,000 watt FM radio stations, and nobody knew what to do with them. Nobody really believed in them. People didn't really believe that they were going to eventually take over, and they did. I think podcasting is today where FM was in the mid to late 60s, and but to me, it's one step further. Podcasting is truly like the wild, wild west, because anybody can do it. You don't have to have an FCC license to do podcasting. Look at what you're doing right now. I mean, we're doing a video. You can call it a video pod, or a pod video, or a video, whatever you want to call it, but we're doing it. If I wanted to start the Gary Berkowitz podcast, I could start that tomorrow. I could put it up on my website. I could get it on all these different platforms and get it going. I read in all the trades about how podcasting has peaked, or I'll read a story that, podcasting, I go, no. This is the new thing now. This is a thing, podcasting. And it's a little bit unorganized right now. A lot of people still don't know. People say to me all the time, well, where do I find these things? And how do I know which podcasts are out there? And where are they? And how do you do it? So that's the stage we're in with it right now. It reminds me a little bit of FM, because I remember when I was a kid, my dad used to buy a new car every year, and he had an AM radio in his car. And at one point I asked him about FM, and he said, Gary, that's an extra. We can't get that. That was like an add-on to get an FM radio. And then, of course, they invented the FM converters, and they were affordable, and people were buying them like crazy. So podcasting's in the same place right now, that FM radio was, and people are figuring it out, and a lot of people are figuring it out. I cannot tell you how many citizens and by that I mean non-radio people, say to me, here's the conversation. So Gary, what do you do for a living? Well, I'm a broadcast media consultant. Really? What does that mean? I work in the I work at radio stations. Really? Does anyone listen to the radio anymore? And then, of course, I'm used to that question, and I say, of course they do, and on and on and on. And then usually the next question is, tell me about this podcasting thing that's going on. I heard something about podcasting. So it's in the conversation. I think it's a big thing. But it's in its very early stages right now. So when I read the articles about how podcasting has peaked, I go, come on. I mean, this thing is just getting going right now.
Well, the market is so chopped up now, and people have a lot of things vying for their attention. I think our attention span is greatly reduced nowadays, because it used to be there were like 3 or 4 local radio stations you used to listen to, and there was no internet. So it was pretty easy to figure out which station you want to listen to. Nowadays, you have your favorite radio station, your favorite podcast. What is it? Spotify, Apple Music, Yahoo, whatever. You've got so many choices to make. I don't think some people know how to make that choice. And yet, statistically, I think Edison Research had a recent poll that they did. In-car listening, radio's still the king, with about 80% of the audience. I don't know if that number is still accurate, but I think there's a lot of misinformation out there about the death of radio happening right now, where it's not. It's just that there are more choices and more things going on. And the efficacy, if I can use that word, of podcasting has yet to be proven. And I'm going to run over to Alex just for a second, because Alex is our expert with new media. Alex, I think it has something to do with justifying why would you spend money on podcasting when there are no statistics or no data or metadata to be able to gauge that. Do you feel that that's having an effect?
Massive, massive effect. And I've heard this over and over and over again from well-established people. I mean, one of the most well-established people in the industry for podcasts, if you look at it, who's been doing it consistently and successfully for a long time, is the Twit Podcast Network, which was started by Leo Laporte. Now, you got to remember that the word podcast is kind of a portmanteau, but really popularized with the invention of the iPod by Apple. And podcast kind of caught on in 2004. And the underlying technology that powers podcasts is RSS feeds, right? So it's just an MP3 file, audio file that's in an XML file. We don't really know that much about, or really rather anything about the demographics and psychographics of the people that are listening to these shows. We have download numbers. And now, Gary mentioned that podcasts are still a new thing. Now, podcasts have been around for about 21 years now, but that's really nothing if you compare it to radio. So it's still kind of a nascent industry. But yes, that is the main complaint that I hear from people that are pulling back. Well, people that are pulling back and not spending money are the ones that are basically saying, look, we don't know anything about your audience, right? And companies like Twit have to do this yearly what's the word? The word's escaping me. They have to do a survey, right, of their listeners, and ask them politely to fill out this survey to get to know more about them, so they can pass this information along to their advertisers, because the analytics just aren't there. Unlike YouTube, which is why YouTube has kind of taken over, is that YouTube, because it's owned by Google, has so much more data about what they know about those people, right down to the gender of the person that is watching the show. Like, I could look at my dashboard right now and tell you a lot about the audience that you just don't know about podcasts. And that's really the main thing. You're kind of taking that person's word for it. Like, I could show you download numbers. Doesn't really mean much. Okay, so let's say my show gets 100,000 unique downloads per episode. Yeah, but who are these people? How old are they? What are they interested in? What are their income levels? I have no idea. And you can start to see that paints a picture of why it's so challenging to sell ads.
Yeah, Mark, you probably have a point on this.
So what I think is really interesting is that, and Alex, correct me if I'm wrong, there are very few podcasts that are live. Is that a fair statement? Most of them are pre-recorded and then put up?
Yeah, I think that's a very fair statement. Absolutely.
So I think let's look at the strengths of podcasting versus radio. And Gary, I think you're the perfect person to ask this to. If you're talking about spoken word more so than music, the advantage of radio is that the listeners can call in, and when you add to that certain software, you can have people come in over the internet, watch the radio show, and ask questions and chat with each other. That makes it much more interactive than what you can get with a podcast. So I think radio needs to take a look at the technology that's out there, the marketing teams they have in place, the marketing consultants, and they need to kind of pull in some of this new technology and really take home the fact that they have the strengths of broadcast plus digital combined and have a much further reach than just a podcast that's static and that was recorded. Now, granted, the advantage of podcast is it's on demand. But radio stations could easily do that by putting their live broadcast on demand as well.
Gary, is it apples and oranges, or are we making the proper comparisons here?
No, I think here's the problem. It comes down to money. And it comes down to somebody saying, maybe we have to do something from a programming standpoint that's different than what we're doing now. I mean, honestly, I sometimes, I live in Detroit, and I spend a lot of time in Florida, in Miami, Fort Lauderdale area. And I'm bored by the radio in both of those markets right now. I'm bored. There's just nothing there. Now, maybe I know too much. Maybe I know, what's going on behind the curtain a little bit too much, but I don't think so.
Let's get a young guy's opinion from Alex Alex, you've often lamented that you missed the personality and the communication that you used to get from the older personality-oriented radio guys. Do you see that as a problem? Do you listen to radio today?
That's exactly what the problem is, at least from my perspective. I don't hear, every time I get in the car, I turn on the radio, I turn on to two of the biggest radio stations, two of the biggest rock radio stations, 99.3 CFOX and Rock 101. And back in the 90s when I was growing up in high school, they had a lot of personalities that made those stations incredibly successful and amassed a very loyal following. I mean, look, we've had one of our previous guests, Larry Hennessy, of the very famous Larry and Willie Show. Those two guys, talk about personality. You get them in a room, and they're funny, and they're coming up with all sorts of gags and pranks, and they would do these meetups and stuff like that, and they knew how to craft a really entertaining show, and they were edgy. That's the other thing that kept me coming back, is that they were edgy, always pushing the boundaries of what you were allowed to say on the radio. And now when I listen to the radio, I'm just bored. I'm just bored with the people that I'm listening to. They're not interesting. They're talking about stuff that I'm not interested in, and right down to the delivery and their cadence. They're just not exciting to listen to, and I just really miss all of the excitement that we had 30 years ago in the broadcast industry. And I'm not saying that it doesn't exist at all. I'm just focusing on my market here. And maybe there's some other radio station where they've got some more interesting DJs, but it's just not the same. It's not the same anymore. And I think that's a big part of, that's one small piece of the puzzle. I think really the bigger issue is the medium itself has become a little worn. It's a little dusty, and the thing is, it's being replaced by YouTube, really. And I'd actually say YouTube is replacing even podcasts. If you look at the data, YouTube is the most watched platform, period. You compare it to Netflix, Amazon, Disney. There are people, think about this, that It's incredible when you think about this, that people are spending more time watching people talk about infinite amount of different subjects. And I think it's fantastic because it allows people to build content for any audience, no matter how broad or how niche you want to go. And nobody can tell you what to say or do, right? And your level of success is really dictated by how you put your own show together, much like podcasts. And so radio has a lot of limitations, but the barrier is a lot higher too. And I just think, I think its time is gone in the sense that there are more and more younger people that are just not turning on the radio anymore. I'm not saying radio is going to be going away in the next 5 or even 10 years, but I'm just saying the uphill battle that everybody's having to face is not going to get any easier. That's going to
Alex,
get a lot
do you think that the radio jocks that you used to listen to, the shows, were more of your companion back in those days and less, more automated, more impersonal?
Yeah. I felt
like your friend like they used to be?
Absolutely. I definitely felt a stronger connection to the people. And look, I don't know what it is. Is it just a lack of training? But you know what? It's not even training. I'm going to backtrack here for a sec. I don't think it's even training, because a lot of the best people in radio never had any formal training. I think it's just a God-given thing that you either have it or you don't. And I'm not saying that you don't get better over time. Of course you do. You learn from mistakes. You learn on the job, just by throwing yourself in the fire, and you learn how to craft a show and get better. You work on it. But I think there's some innate talent and ability, just like you could say that about musicians. Look, my dad's a perfect example. I love my dad. He loves music, but he has no musical, his ear just isn't there. I've tried so hard, and he's taken training, and he just can't grasp even the creative aspects of just like, okay, so the basic chord structures, but like his brain, the creativity just isn't there. He doesn't know how to put things together. He doesn't know how to improvise, and no amount of training is going to make him a really successful musician. And
so,
I
Gary,
just think that's a hard pill to swallow.
Gary, how do you go into a station group and say, here's how I'm going to change the way you do your format or you present? Is it ringing true what Alex is saying? Do you make adjustments for those kinds of things? Is that something you recognize?
Yeah. It's very, very difficult because, more and more, the resources are less and less. So, the one thing, Mitch, that we talked about in my last appearance on the show was, my love for radio and how, I'm hanging in to the very, very end, blah, 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 blah. And I still feel that way. I still love radio. And I think I can do some pretty amazing things with not a lot of resource. I can make these radio stations sound pretty darn good on very, very limited resource. But that doesn't necessarily make them what they're going to need to be to get a resurgence in radio, to get and again, I'm going to kind of go back, and Alex, what you were saying is so true. You were saying how the jocks or the on-air people were always better, and it was more entertaining, and it was, all of that. Well, it all goes back to the money. I hate to say that, but it all goes back, the old expression, follow the money. Well, it all goes back to that because do I think radio needs to be a little bolder, and do I think radio needs to maybe be experimenting with some new formats and some new things that are going to get people's attention, especially younger people? Absolutely. But if there's no money to pay for it, it's never going to happen. So what happens is we have to let I mean, years ago, we started letting the night jocks go. And then we started letting, weekenders go. And then we started letting, all we've been doing is gutting these radio stations of their most important resource, and that's people. And the reality is, and podcasting, the thousands and thousands of podcasts that are out there, and all of the different channels that are on YouTube that are out there are proving that it's not necessarily just about music anymore. Mitch, you said the word, and the word is companionship. I find myself sometimes wanting to just have some kind of talk product on in the background. I might not sit there and I'm not going to be glued to every word of it, but you can't get that anymore. The other day, I experienced it the other day. I've got a Bose Wave radio that I've had forever. It's a beautiful piece of equipment, and it sounds great. Well, it doesn't sound so great if you're in a PPM market, because the audio in the PPM markets is just awful. But so I said, you know what? I want to listen to the news station. And Odyssey operates WWJ here in Detroit, and they're great. They're probably one of the best all news stations in the country. They're fabulous, but they're still on AM. And so I went to put it on, and it's all static, and reception is not great. So I had to go find something else. I think if I owned a radio station, if I were like in that group, I'd have my all news station on one of my FM signals right now. I think it's like in New York, it's reborn. 1010 Wins on 92.3. Wind sounds great. I was in New York this weekend, and I was listening to 1010 Wins on 92.3 the whole weekend. It was great. I loved it. It was fabulous. Now, you could argue I'm not in the demo and blah, 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 but I don't think that has anything to do with it. I think it all comes right back to the money.
Yeah. Gary, Mark is championing at the bit, as the word goes. I'm sure he has something to say about what you just said, because I think it was very important what you said about that companionship thing. Mark, go ahead.
I think both what Alex said and what Gary said come together when you have these large owners that are operating in billions of dollars of debt that have gone to try and make the most efficient business model they can, which means they may be broadcasting from one location to all of their locations, which takes some of the personal touch out of local radio. And they start to pre-record, and they start to do voice tracking, and it just takes the personality out of the radio. And I think until the market changes and we go back to a more local, not commodity is not the right word, but we go to a more local market where people actually know the announcers. The announcers are out at events locally, and they start to build relationships with those listeners. That we have to go back to that model to make radio work. That's what made radio so successful in the first place.
Mark, we have some questions coming in.
Do.
Why don't we jump to them? And then if I'm cutting you off, Gary, to stop me. We do. I want to get to what some of the folks watching have to say. So why don't we kick it off with...
So Brett from Appleton, Wisconsin says, for a listener-supported terrestrial radio station with a global reach like WWOZ in New Orleans, which is typically the larger cost center, maintaining the local antenna broadcast or streaming the audio over the internet?
Good question. Gary, can you help us with that?
Well, streaming the audio over the internet, they're both expensive. And maybe Mark could answer this because he owns a couple of radio stations. Maintaining broadcast facilities, over-the-air facilities, is not cheap. It's expensive. And especially if you have an AM facility, with all the rules that go into AM with directional and, all that stuff, it's probably, and now, of course, if you're a music radio station, the licensing rates just took a huge jump recently, which is the next tier of expense that radio stations are going to get hit with, and it's not a good thing. It's going to cause this contraction even more so. But I mean, look, I think it's expensive to maintain an over-the-air radio station. It's probably more expensive to do that. Again, Mark, jump in.
Okay, so I'll tell you, I have 2 radio stations. Each one has a tower. Tower maintenance costs a lot of money to maintain those towers, especially one of them is 8 miles from the Atlantic Ocean. So it's constantly has to be, maintained, and we got to send tower climbers up to sand this and sand that and paint this and paint that and tighten this cable and that. So it takes a lot of time and effort. I remember when we used to be on the old incandescent lamps, we were sending people up the tower every 12 months to change a bulb. And when you change one, you change them all because the cost of climbing is so expensive. It's an interesting question because it's not the same across the board. For instance, the music rights that are covered for the radio allow you to stream if you have an app. Whereas if you wanted to go out and just do internet-only radio, the cost to license for those licenses to play that music over internet radios, from what I've heard, is much more expensive than over the air. I guess because the reach is so much more. So we're fortunate in the area where we can stream to our app, and that's included in the rate that we have for music. Now, we're not a music station. We're a news station, so the music rights that we pay are much lower than what a music station does because we're just using it for bumper music. So it's, I'm not comparing apples to apples. But so audio, from what I understand, is much more expensive if you're just going to stream it over the internet. But that's offset by the cost of the towers and the cost of the studios and updating all the equipment. And so it's very expensive either way.
Yeah, it's tough. And I'll speak a moment to the streaming audio aspect of it. I was involved in a number of businesses that went through the normal process of getting sound exchange to get permission to be able to stream music over the air. I'm telling you, here's the bottom line from the music from the record companies and the music companies in general. They don't want you streaming music. Trust me, they just don't want you in that business, and they're going to price it accordingly so that you don't do it. And I think if you check the statistics, people that thought that, well, I'm going to have my own radio station on the internet, whether I do it legally or not, has gone down dramatically, because between that and the music police and the added cost of streaming music, non-radio, non-terrestrial broadcast, is extremely expensive. And there are so many choices in the constellation of things that you can tune into. As I said earlier, the choice used to be 3 or 4 radio stations in your market. Now it's probably hundreds of thousands, maybe millions, because of the internet. So, Gary, do radio stations have to go head-to-head with the internet, or does it just have to be radio and be happy about being a terrestrial stick that serves a market?
I'm going to go back to what I originally was talking about. We have got to figure out a way to get more revenue coming into radio. We have got to figure out a way that to address the people who are controlling the dollars, the ad dollars, to come back to radio, to support radio, not to help support radio, to help their client. That's the problem. And until we figure that one out, all this other stuff doesn't matter. Because it's this spiral, this downward spiral of having to let talent go, of doing more with less, it does reach a point of diminishing return where you can only do so much. And all of a sudden, what you're offering your listenership is not that great anymore. It's not about, we're not at the point where we're talking about rotations and we're talking about, should we play the 80s anymore, or should we be playing more 90s? That's not what it's about. We are at a crisis level with revenue in the radio industry right now. And I'm not sure there's enough conversation about this, about how do we approach the people who control the revenue, who control where the advertising dollars are going.
Do you think they're they need to tell the story better? And this is directed at Mark. Mark, if you had a chance to hire a superstar radio personality for one of your radio stations versus a superstar salesperson, I have a feeling that the sales guy is going to win every time because that affects your revenue, right?
Well, I mean, we already have the superstar announcers in place, but we could always use more superstar salespeople.
Exactly.
So, finding salespeople right now is extremely difficult, and finding good ones is even harder. We're interviewing people all the time, and it's just a challenge to get people to want to get out there and sell. I think when you do find them, and I think historically, one of the benefits of radio station owners is that they already have a sales team. So what we've been doing is operating more as a marketing company that owns radio stations and helping the clients that we serve build their brands by not only selling radio advertising, but also working with partners to sell them whatever kind of advertising will best bring them a return, will bring them the highest return on their investment. So I think part of the answer, Gary, might be that radio stations need to start marketing any kind of advertising and marketing to help build their clients' brands.
Yeah, well, that used to be a job of an ad agency or, I used to do a lot of business in the radio business, but it's dried up. People don't think radio first now, just off the top of their head, as to where they want to spend their ad, their tight ad money to be able to go out there. In fact, a lot of them I talk to, they'll say, Mitch, where should I be spending my money? And I'm like, I don't know. Linear broadcasting is not the thing that it used to be. How do you divvy up all the money you want? My opinion is, and I'll go off on a limb here and I'll just say it, is I've traditionally told people, I said, find one medium that you like and own it. So if that's billboards or radio or Google ads, put all your money into that one thing and own it, because you can't do them all. You have to make a choice. And I think people are that are advertisers right now are confused. They're confused about traditional radio and television advertising on cable TV or using social media. They don't really know how to spend their money. And it seems to me that the only people that are telling them how to do that are your enlightened salespeople at the radio station that are doing what they're doing. Gary, you're running into this situation around the country?
Well, Mark, I hear from all of my clients what you echoed a moment ago about how hard it is to find good salespeople. Because the problem with that is that young people have not grown up with radio the way we grew up with radio. Example, I remember when I was still working at radio stations, our sales guys, and I worked for some, I was very fortunate. I worked for some pretty big radio stations, but our sales guys were as into the radio station as the programming guys were. I mean, these guys were they were killer. I mean, if you would change a rotation or you would do a promotion or something, the sales guys, I mean, if they didn't like it, you knew about it. If they liked it, you knew about it. They were as much into the station because we all grew up with radio, and radio was a superstar to all of us. It's hard today because a lot of the, and I don't want to sound like an old guy, but, you start talking to these kids in their 20s and 30s. They didn't grow up with radio like we did. And to them, it's like, you say, here, we're gonna pay you on commission. Here's at the risk of sounding old, here's the phone book. Start calling people up. They don't want to do that. At least that's what I get back. So finding salespeople, and again, this all comes back to one thing. It all comes back to the money. It comes back to the revenue. We've got to figure that part out. And I feel as though that we're spinning our wheels if we don't spend more time figuring that out.
Yeah, Mark, you have a question that covers what we're talking about. Why don't you go ahead and ask your own question, if you don't mind?
Okay, great. Gary, the Salisbury market, where our stations are, where my stations are, is about market number 131. If you were to start a new station in that market that has about 42 stations, what format would you choose?
Well, that's a tough question, Mark. But you know what I think I would do is, I would kind of cull it down. First of all, there are 42 signals coming in, but no, you're a rated market, right?
Yes, they still have the diaries.
Okay. So, I mean, I would first want to look at the numbers and kind of see where the majority of listening, I'm going to guess that out of those 42 signals, the majority of listening is going to how many? 5 or 6 of them, maybe?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, about 5 or 6. So, I would look at them and kind of try to see where, there might have been an obvious opening formatically, which leads me to another issue, and that is that it's the 25-54 disease. That everything has to be 25 to 54, and that's tough because that really limits you as to what you can do. We are forgetting about an entire group of people who are big listeners of radio and have a lot of money available to spend, but if they're over 50, the advertising world doesn't care about them. Now, there are certain platforms, especially the cable news channels. I mean, if you watch any of them, they're making all their revenue off that older demo. Okay? Radio doesn't even attempt to go there. There you go. It's back to the money again. But Mark, to go back, I think what I would do is I would look at the Nielsen numbers in your market, and I would, and a lot would have to do with you as an owner. How experimental do you want to be? Or do you just want to choose a format? Well, it's worked here, it's worked there, it's worked here, it'll work here. So, there's a lot of, that's a tough question to answer. I maintain that in every single market in America, there is a format for 50 plus listeners. There's a hole a mile wide for that format, but nobody wants to do it. And every now and then you get somebody who says, you know what, we can go on the older end and we're going to be good. And they discover they can't make any money because everybody's got 25-54 disease.
Actually, we've been lucky because we're news talk. So I wouldn't say we're 25 to 54. I'd say we're more 40, 45 is where we start. And we've got callers to call in their 80s and 90s. So we've got the listenership, and we've been very successful. We don't rely on Nielsen so much in our market because I've been advised that the number of diaries that come back is so small, it's insignificant to really be able to tell what's going on. But what we do know is that
there's also a rumor that they're going to delist stations that don't buy the diary or buy the service.
From what I've heard, they have.
Yeah, so there you go.
Can you guys explain what that term is? Because I'm feeling like I'm left out here. 25 to 54. What does that mean?
25 years to 54 years old.
You're talking about the age range.
It's straight up demographics.
The people with the most disposable income, right, Gary?
Yes, and I'm not sure you can compare a 25-year-old to a 54-year-old who, is, as far as disposable income goes. Right. But, that's just where things are at. And again, I go right back there saying, we've got to get to the people who are controlling the ad dollars. And we've got to do a better job at convincing them that what we do can help their client. Because I think right now...
Yeah. And we've been very lucky. We've had a lot of good clients that have been with us for over 20 years. And they'll do testimonials to us because they know that when they advertise something on our station, people come through the door the next day for it. And we've got car dealers coming to us now because they say, hey, everybody that comes in for maintenance or service on their car, they're listening to you guys. So, I mean, we've been really fortunate in that area where in our market, we're the known place to go to advertise.
So where does it start, Gary? Does it start with being more sophisticated on how you represent and sell? Or do you generate the perfect format that's doing the perfect job to reach those demographics? I mean, it seems to me it's a chicken and egg here.
It is. I think it is. I think it's probably a two-pronged process here. I think we really need to start coming up with maybe some new formats and some new ideas to put on the radio to generate more interest. But at the same time, we have got to figure out how do we break the image of being, I was talking to one of my sales managers last week, and he was telling me a story about how they were making a pitch, and the guy who now owns the business said, my dad and mom still listen to the radio, but you know what, we're going to be buying, we're buying Instagram or Facebook or whatever the digital properties were. It's a real challenge, to say the least.
Sure. And when I used to be doing mornings at the local radio station, I did it for like 3 years stint. I went out with the salespeople. I figured that I'm the best representative of the station, along with the salesperson, to say, hey, I'm the guy you listen to, and I want to get involved in your product or your service, and I want to talk it up on the show. I mean, that kind of cooperation, I think that it's very hard to do that with a voice tracking disc jockey that's brought in from somewhere else, and that's not a local entity. That can come in and add a little personality to that pitch. I think that's an important part of the meal ticket right now to move up recognition of the importance of that live and local, and also the sales part, that support. And I know a lot of radio guys that wouldn't do that.
And what I tell my stations all the time is, I say, guys, the programming guys, we're the ones who can really be so helpful here. Before you go to a client, before you pitch something above and beyond just a spot schedule, before you go in and pitch a promotion, come to us first. Let's talk about this a little bit, because 99% of the time, here's what happens. Okay, I get a phone call from one of my PDs. The sales department sold this promotion. You're not going to believe it. And it's like, okay, what is it? And, they tell you, okay? And it's the worst. It's not going to help anybody. It's not going to help the client. It's not going to help the radio station. It just sucks. I said, why didn't you call me before you went out and let us work with you and come up with something that's going to work? Because we know what will work for a client. Us programming guys, this is what we do. This is our business. This is what we're expert in. We'll come up with some ideas that will, A, be good for the client and will also be good for the radio station. I've got a few stations that are doing that now, and they are just so happy with that because it's working out so much better for them. Because they go in, it's not like, the sales guy comes back and he says, oh, you're not going to believe it, I got an order. And then, we discover that, they want to give away chewing gum or something like that.
I recall the sales guy saying, hey, we got this promotion. We're going to deliver lunch from Arby's to our clients once a day. And I said, I'm the morning guy. I should be the one taking the lunch to our listeners personally and delivering it. And that's good for the client, Arby's, and it's good for the customers because, hey, there's that. That's what he looks like. Oh my God, what a pain in the ass he is. But
right. I just think there should be a law that sales guys can't make up promotions. Come on. That's not what they do. That's not what they do.
Well, the business is very territorial. The salespeople they draw the line, the engineers draw the line, and certainly the air staff does the same thing. It's got to all change. It's a new paradigm.
Well,
It's,
I mean, we have our programming director in our sales meetings just to make sure, hey, here's something we're thinking about. Is this going to work? Can you actually carry it out? Can you deliver it?
And Mark, that is brilliant. Okay, I think that is brilliant having your PD in there because whether you have great programmers or it doesn't matter. That's kind of how we're built. We're built, on kind of like a promotional platform. It's really a big reason that we all got into radio. So we're good with that stuff, and we understand. And Mark, you're doing this, so maybe I hope I don't know if you'll agree with me. Is that when you get the programming people involved, they're sitting there saying, okay, how am I going to make this all work on the air? Okay, it's going to go over here. It'll go over here. Yeah, we can do this. This will be good. We can make this work.
It's the logistics of radio.
It's the logistics, and those kind of promotions, when you get your programming people involved, that's a good example of convincing the people who are controlling the money, because it's all about the money. They're going to get a better outcome from it.
When everybody understands how we got where we are, then they're all willing to work towards that goal.
Well, the other part, Mark, is that most radio stations still think it's the 80s and it worked in the 80s. Let's try it now. And it doesn't work that way anymore. Yeah. Same thing with oldies and music. It's not, oldies aren't the 60s and 70s anymore. It's the 80s and 90s. Come on, wake up. But let me switch things around completely here just for a second, because I know we have some older radio guys like myself that are here, and they're scratching their heads saying, well, I just got canned from such and such group, and I'm out on my own, and you know what? I can't get a job to save my life anymore. What are you looking for? Can you look for, let's say, seasoned professionals like myself? I'll use myself as the guinea pig here. How do guys like me find a job at a local radio station or a regional radio station or voice tracking? Are we viable anymore, or should we just give it up and move on to something else? Gary, that's to you.
Well, that's tough. It's very, very tough.
I feel a letdown coming.
It's when I get an opening, and the station actually wants somebody, there. They want to hire, a live person to. Some of the obstacles that I run into are nobody wants to move for radio jobs anymore, and even if they'd consider a move, the kind of money that I can offer them is so low that they can't afford it. And what has kind of happened in the radio world is, here's what I hear a lot. Gary, I would love that gig. It sounds great, but my wife is a medical assistant and she makes $200,000 a year. We can't move. We're not going to move for a $50,000 radio job.
Right. Right.
So you've got that to deal with. It's a real
problem.
That
is exactly, Gary, what I ran into. So a pretty unique, and I'll just share this quickly, because I'd worked in the IT tech industry for a long time, for about 15 years. And all of a sudden I found myself laid off without a job. And I'm 43 now, and I think I want to say I was 35, 36 at the time. And I got a bit of an inheritance from my grandmother who had passed away, and I said, what am I going to do with my life? Kind of tired of working in tech. Maybe I could get a job in broadcast because I've been doing this thing, talking on the mic. I have a passion for it. I've been doing this just as a hobby, as a thing on my own time for years. I'd been doing it for 13 years at that point already, and I knew a lot about it. So what did I do? I went back to school full-time as an adult, which was a bit of a strange experience. And I graduated after 2 years from that program, from a very well-respected, one of the best here, for broadcast radio. And what did I do? I did nothing with that, because I discovered very quickly that every single radio station wanted to pay me minimum wage, and they wanted me to move to some small town in the middle of nowhere, and I literally could not afford it. I had just, at that time, when I graduated, I took some of my inheritance money and I got a really good deal on my place. It was my first home that I was able to put a down payment on. And I said to myself, well, I have a mortgage now. There is no possible way that I could move to another town and take that job. And so I was forced to take another job that, worked for me, that I could do with my current skill set, my background, and my experience that paid more.
And that's the way,
because I couldn't do
Alex,
it.
that's the way radio is, is you had to travel. I mean, I've traveled in 3 or 4 markets in order to continue to be self-employed, or radio employed. Well, but the point I'm making is nowadays with technology, you can voice track. And I don't think, Gary, I don't want to put you on the spot, but what's the average voice tracker make? Just a typical radio voice tracker, a couple $100 a month, a week, maybe? I don't know.
I would say the average is, depending upon the market, depending upon the owner, depending upon the situation, anywhere probably from between $400 a month to maybe 800, in some cases 9 or 1,000 maybe. But
there you go.
Think about that.
Alex, you're not going to live off of that. And guess what? We got AI knocking on the door too now. So would you replace live voice tracked or recorded voice track guys with AI? Would you do that?
Hope not.
Well, it's going to happen. I think it's in the pipeline. So the business is changing.
And I think we talked about this briefly. We were talking about the money that is there, or lack thereof, that seems to not exist anymore too. I think that's one of the challenges too. I mean, if you're a seasoned broadcaster, I mean, how many radio stations now can really afford? There used to be a lot more money where they could afford to pay really good salaries to talent. And how many people that are successful now in their, say, late 20s, maybe they're in their 30s now, how much are they making? They're probably not making $150,000, $200,000 a year. They're probably making a lot less than that. And look, cities a city like where I live in Vancouver here, I mean, you can't even build. The real estate market is out of control. There is nowhere that I can go where I can buy a property now for less than $1.5 million. Think about that. $1.5 million for like a and like even an apartment. To buy an apartment now, everybody wants $800,000 plus for a little
Alex,
400 square foot shoebox apartment.
With everything.
It's happening with everything. I mean, there are very few large companies that are hiring full time anymore because they don't want to give all the benefits and everything.
Sure.
Look
of course, nobody also. And also with COVID, I will say, not just the radio industry, but I think there's a whole new generation now of people that also don't want to go back into an office. And I think that's also going to harm the broadcast industry at large, because everybody wants to be able to do a job remotely in the comfort of, people are investing, like me, look at my camera, look at my setup. People are investing in home studios now. They want to be able to, companies are not able to retain talent because after COVID ended and everybody was asked to come back, guess what happened? A lot of people said, yeah, see you later. I'm going to find another job.
So much for our rant on our relevance in today's world. And now you know why I'm the last angry DJ, because, I realize I'm 71 years old and I'm not going to get the jobs that I used to be able to get in radio, no matter how I sound. I sound young. I still don't sound like I'm 71, but unless somebody said to me, we want somebody that sounds just like you did in such and such year on such and such radio station, maybe I could pull that off, but I don't know when that might happen. Maybe on Sirius XM. Hello, Sirius XM, in case you're interested. Got some room here. So Gary, I guess my question is, how do you remain relevant as talent in today's world?
You know what? I don't think that's all that hard to do. I think it's pretty easy to remain relevant. You got to work at it. I mean, you have to kind of, be in touch with everything that's going on in the world and not be resistant to it. Some of the more senior radio guys are very resistant to today. And I tell guys all the time, I say, hey, look, don't get angry at me, but this train is moving. And you're either on the train or you're off the train. And, you got to make that decision. And a lot of the guys will say to me, Gary, you're still in it. You could fix this, and you could. I go, no, 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 no. I got on the train a long time ago, and that's why I'm still doing it. I said, I am on the train, and I'm moving forward with it. I said, do I always love it? No. Do I sometimes wish it could be the way it was, back in 1971, when I was a young DJ? Yeah, of course. Those were good times, but I'm on the train. I'm moving forward, and
and that is so good. And congratulations for being able to do that. By the way, I do want to acknowledge your analogy for FM radio and AM radio back in the day. You are so spot on with that. I even fought it at a major radio station in Philadelphia. I fought they just bought an FM station. They were going to do a different format on it. And I said, you guys are nuts. We got the #1 AM station in Philadelphia, maybe in the country, WFIL. And I said, you just bought an FM station? Let's move it to FM, because I can show you in the ratings where the numbers there's so much denial. And I keep saying denial is a river in Egypt. It doesn't live here. And the only thing I got for my trouble is that I was a young 19-year-old kid that was a music director, got canned because I had too much of an opinion and no patience with the way things were going. So I'm with you on the train. I think it's a great idea. I'm on that train, and what I tell my owners are, what do you want? I just ask them, what do you want to do? What do you, tell me what you want to accomplish here, and I'm going to find a way to make it happen. Because us old radio rats, that's what we do. we're good at that. We're good at, and that's where the history and the experience comes together with technology. I've got one radio station right now that I will put up against any radio station in America. It's up in Scranton, Pennsylvania. It's WQFM. I'm completely, I have jocks on the air from 6 a.m. to midnight. It's completely voice tracked using Zeta. I'll put this radio station product up against anybody, okay? And it can be done. So, that's how I look at it. That's when people hire me, that's how I approach it. I said, we're going to figure this one out, but just tell me what I have to work with. Yeah, I'll back you on that one. I've heard your station. It sounds 100%, just like you say. It's good. And, it doesn't mean that Gary, at his accelerated age, where I am too, can't come up with the magic bullet that's going to work. And I think that we've talked about some of those things here, being companionable, even if you are voice tracked, to sound like you aren't voice tracked, to sound like you're really there. I mean, one of the best programmers in the world, Jay Cook, told me ages ago, all you really need to do, Mitch, is to tell people everything's okay. I don't care how you go about doing it. Just tell them it's all good. Everything's fine. It's all good out there. Mark, do you have something you want to say on that?
Yeah. So, I mean, Gary, I guess my question would be, with the advances in technology and the ability to control an audio board from anywhere and the ability to utilize tools like Zoom, can't radio stations work with the budgets and reduce the budgets by having their announcers be anywhere in the world to reduce the cost? Yeah. Go ahead.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of radio stations are proving that. It's hard for a lot of owners to buy into the concept that their radio station their morning show is coming in from Nashville, and their middays are coming in from Florida, and their afternoons are coming in from Baltimore, and their nights are coming in from Rhode Island. You know what I mean? It's a hard concept for some owners, but I think it's a great way to put a great product on your air. If you get the right people, that station can sound absolutely fabulous. In a few of the stations where I do it, the guys are talking about what's going on in town, and they're local, and they're in touch, and it sounds great. And I could never, ever get this group of guys to move.
And as long as AI doesn't interfere and start destroying all of that credibility. Like if I was an AI and I had to pronounce Schuylkill Expressway in Philadelphia, I would probably say, on the Chicago Expressway, it would hallucinate and say something off the wall. It's only a matter of time. I think that AI is going to replace all of us. I'm sorry. If there's a job that you can do, that AI can do, it's just a matter of time before that happens. And they can program it into it. I see the money people in radio saying, AI, that means I won't have to spend the $400 a month for that voice tracking guy that I got coming out of Detroit. Isn't that going to be an issue?
Already here. AI is already here.
Well, I know, but I'm just saying it's going to muddy the waters for a while, and then eventually it's going to replace us.
AI is being used in so many different ways. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Yeah. Go ahead.
Gary, you don't have to comment on it. It's me on a rant. Sorry about that.
I mean, we're using it in the sales to build all programs for branding and everything else. We're working the software we use for a radio station comes with AI built right in. So we're not using it so much on the production side as we are on the sales side.
How's the first time it tried to pronounce Rehoboth? How did it do on that?
Rehoboth. Or Houston, Delaware instead of Houston.
Yeah, exactly. Anyhow, I'm sorry, Gary, that you had to hear me. Again, I am the last angry DJ, and I have to argue my relevance sometimes, and AI scares the crap out of me. I just don't like anything to do with it. All right, I think we covered a lot of great stuff here, and Gary, for your second time around, it's amazing that we still learn more from you in terms of what's going on. I think you're kind of guy that is a deep thinker, and you've got this thing figured out. I think it's a game of strategy. I think it's a game of putting people in the right pegs and squares to make things happen. And I congratulate you on your successes out there. I agree the Scranton station sounds great. Where can people go tune that in if they want to?
Just go to it's really a great website. It's listentomix.com.
That sounds easy to remember. Listentomix.com. And if somebody wanted to reach out to you, and I know you're famous for having at least one conversation if somebody wanted to talk to you about your services, where do they reach out to you?
Oh, they can get me. Just Google me, and you'll get to GaryBurke.com, and you can email me through GaryBurke.com or call me or whatever. I'm all over the place. I'm pretty easy to reach and get hold of. So just
you are
I would say start at or to my famous domain that I don't really use, but I have it. It's great. It's called Berkowitz.com.
Wow, where'd you get that one? I bet you got it early before somebody stole it from you.
I just got it about a year ago. I don't really use it as much as I should, but it's like, hey, you want to get hold of me? Call Berkowitz.com, and there it is.
That's great. And by the way, on social media, I saw a picture with you, Tom Birch, and Joel Denver. And I said, wait a minute. I know those guys. In fact, all three of you were on or have been on this program. So I know I'm doing something right when I bring three people in that are pundits in the in different aspects of the broadcast industry, and they have good things to say. So
that was that was a great night. That was taken at the Palm in Dallas at the ABC radio party. It was great. That was a good night. It was a good night.
There you go. So, Gary, thanks for that. Hey, Alex, how do people reach out to us if they want to talk to us about anything, including what we just talked about?
Thanks, Misha. There are numerous ways that you can do that. One of the things that you can do is go to our Discord community, and I'm going to give you an invitation into the front door right now. So if you just pull out your camera or your iPhone or Android phone, if you just scan that QR code that's hovering over my left shoulder here, that will send you into our Discord community. You just got to accept that invitation. We've got all sorts of channels broken up into different topics. We don't have to talk about this show necessarily, but anything that you're interested in, just could be industry, news, technology, anything that you want to talk about. That is a great place to be. Of course, you can also follow us on social media, wherever you use social media. We're pretty much everywhere at The Last Angry DJ. We have an email address where you can reach us the old-fashioned way. It's hello@thelastangrydj.com. We have a website as well. You can visit us. It's thelastangrydj.com. And of course, this show is available as a podcast as well if you don't want to follow us on YouTube. But we would recommend that you click the subscribe or follow up button right there, and that'll ensure you get every new episode each and every week. We live stream this show on YouTube Sundays at 2 p.m. Pacific. That's 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, and
Eastern.
it is available as a podcast. Eastern Standard Time, and it is available as an audio-only podcast wherever you find your podcasts, on Apple, TuneIn, Stitcher, Google, Spotify. You can ask your Amazon Alexa device or any smart device to play The Last Angry DJ, and we'll be right there in your ears for your morning commute. Normally, we put out this episode as a podcast the next day, so today's Sunday, so it should be out by tomorrow morning as well. If you'd also like to support us another way, you can go to patreon.com/TheLastAngryDJ. That's patreon.com/TheLastAngryDJ, and become a coffee supporter by donating $2 a month, just a mere $2 a month. We would appreciate it. Thank you. And of course, thanks to the fine folks at Boink Software, who allow us to use Memo Live, the application that we are using right now to composite this entire show, stream it out to you right now in pristine 4K quality. We couldn't do it without Memo Live, so thanks to those guys as well. Back to you, Mitch.
Oh, I appreciate that. Alex does that all without a teleprompter. I'm shocked and amazed. I couldn't remember the first sentence. I wouldn't be able to get through it. So thanks, Alex. That's why you're the best in your business as a producer and as a co-guy, and et cetera, et cetera. And Mark, what was your takeaway from today's show? Did you learn anything new?
I thought it was great having Gary on. Gary, thank you very much. I learned a lot, and I thought we had a good conversation.
What'd you learn? Give me a takeaway. Yeah,
I learned that I know the secret to making radio great, and I'm going to charge Gary for some consultation.
Wow,
Mark,
Gary, there's a challenge.
Just go to www.callberkowitz.com.
All right.
There you go.
Nice.
I think we have a decent challenge going on here. And Gary, look forward to the next time we can bring you on. Maybe something will happen in the news other than Jimmy Fallon joining up back with ABC, Disney,
Kimmel.
or Jimmy Kimmel. I said Fallon. Sorry, they're all in. I heard they're doing a news channel now, or is that just another nonsense story? That what's his face and Fallon and oh God, forget about it. This is mad cow. It's affecting me. What am I going to do? So
there's not that many late night hosts. You got Seth Meyers, Fallon. You've got Kimmel,
Stephen Colbert.
Stephen Colbert is around now. Yeah,
Ruth Maddow. I heard they're doing a news channel. Wouldn't that be great? I could see Stephen Colbert on there doing it like he did the old Colbert Report. So it's fun. It's fun to have memories, and lots of choices. And that's what I will still listen to radio and still have fun. And I always have the memories in my head of what I did back in the 70s and 80s during the golden years. So, Gary, thanks again for being here. We appreciate it. And we're going to say goodnight once again. And everybody, be safe out there.
Die.